is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Right, welcome everyone to a March 1st edition of the PowerShell Virtual Group of Pass. Trying to remember that name. We didn't get an updated slide deck from HQ yet, so I'm just going to run you through some of the highlights from last month real quick. So we had PowerShell meetings recently on Linux OS fundamentals, PowerShell run spaces, and one late last night on Jenkins operational validation. And the Jenkins one is already up on our YouTube channel, so go check that out if you're interested in validating your environment. Very good presentation by a new presenter, Cody. I actually don't know how to pronounce his last name. I should have asked him last night. Anyways, it's up there, so check it out. And I have a slide here on virtual chapters, but again, we've been renamed to virtual groups. So everything else on this slide is valid, though. Let's go ahead, and all these SQL Saturdays are out of date since we didn't get the updated deck, but there is a SQL Saturday coming up in Christchurch, which is apparently on the South Island, and wanted to let you know about that in case you are in that area and want to go check it out. And some of the most important things, sqlps.io/YouTube, that is where this video will be when we get done recording it and posting it, and sqlps.io/Slack, which is where you can go ask questions, especially if they're big, long, complicated ones that you want to ask and possibly have answered by the presenter after the session is over or anything like that. And while we've got you on the line, the SSRS team has put together some nice commands for being able to deploy reports for SSRS, to be able to take all the reports, all the data sources, and all the data sets on a SQL instance, SSRS instance, and be able to download those to your local machine. Great stuff, but as I was giving them some help and making them better and wrote an article for it, I realized this would all be a lot easier if they just had a provider. And I mentioned it to a couple of people, and everyone said, yes, that's exactly what's missing here is a provider, so that you don't have to have as many commands. So I put together a very quick connect item to say, build a provider for SSRS. And if you go to this link, sqlps.io/vote_SSRS, all of the vote SSRS is lowercase, it'll take you to that connect item, and we would appreciate it if you'd help the community out by upvoting that item and hopefully get us on the SSRS team's radar that, being able to deploy pretty reports would be really helpful, especially since SSRS looks really good these days. And that's pretty much it. The only other slides are, volunteer like us. And with that all wrapped up, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tom.
Let me see. Don't have it yet. There it comes.
Sending it your way.
All right. Let me know when you can see the screen there.
And I can see it.
All right. Get up here. And I'll play from the start. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Tom Norman. We'll be talking about converting unreliable deployments into consistent releases. Aaron and said that we should put DevOps in here. So yeah, this is partially for DevOps, but it's also for coding. So we're going to go very, very quickly for the first part of it because I want to get down, since this is a PowerPoint group, I want to get down to the PowerPoint, how it helps us to deploy the code that you're going to see. So hang on, because we will go very quickly, and I'm going to show you some code, and then we'll actually look at in depth at the PowerPoint part of it. All right, I'm a data architect for KPA. We're out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm out of Raleigh, North Carolina. The company's out of Denver, Colorado. and I am the leader of the Passive Virtualization virtual chapter. We're also having our SQL Saturday March 11th, so if you're around the Raleigh area, come by and see us and go ahead and register at sqlsaturday.com. My company, we're basically a compliance company, but we'll go on past that. So here's what we're going to try to do today. I need to create a deployment process which can be deployed to any environment, dev, QA, UAT, prod, wherever. And I want to run exactly the same scripts in all locations. I don't want to have a different script per location. For example, sometimes I see people doing a security script that you've got a dev script and you've got a QA script and you've got a UAT script. Let's just have one. That's all we want to do. And we'll only deploy the changes for a given database project. So when we're looking at creating this, any scripts you put in this folder, and if the database exists on the server, it will actually run just those scripts. And I also want to be able to run these database scripts, .SQL files. I want to be able to run them over and over and over again. Because we know, for example, in our QA environment, we'll run it 20, 30, 40, 50 times, however long that release process. And of course, we're not going to release anything without a script. That means jobs, that means operators, that means anything in master or MSDB. The only area that we cannot do that currently with, of course, is going to be your policy-based management. But everything else, unless they've changed it, and I haven't seen it recently, everything else is definitely going to be in a script. So things I've actually seen with deployments is one script with everything in it. And then someone goes in and says, well, we have a QA error and we want to go put that script in there. And all of a sudden you change a stored procedure, but you forget to put it in the one script. And then you've got an older version coming in there. Then when I first started with this company, I saw one folder with multiple scripts for the same database object. So I saw like 4 versions of one stored procedure. And I'm like, well, which one do you deploy? And they couldn't tell me, of course. And then, of course, multiple folders and database objects in a folder structure, which you'll see here. And our company just recently have switched from what I'm going to be showing you to using Database Project for Azure. We're going to be possibly going up to Azure. So this works really well if you're in an Azure VM. But if you're in SQL DB, then it does have drawbacks. So some of our deployment challenges that we have today is precedence orders. So we got to be sure and deploy objects in the correct order. If we don't, we throw errors. So that's one of our challenges. Getting the wrong object script. So sometimes we have one or multiple. So we always want to be able to get the most current one that we're ready to deploy. Having too many files for one database object that we talked about, and missing proper source control. And then the last thing that we normally have a problem with is cluster deployment. And you'll see how I actually handle that. And that is actually handled in the PowerShell script. Okay. So how can a DBA or deployment manager accomplish this? First of all, do use source control for your database objects. If you do not, get with it and get them into source control. All database objects are just like other code. Be sure and put them in source control. And remember that source control is actually your gold copy. It's not production. It should be what is in source control. Because if you have a HR or DR situation come up and you need to rebuild something, or something got messed up, like a security script or whatever, the best place to go back and get it, of course, is from your source control. Okay. And we just talked about that. Just like other software files, they should be checked in and out. If you make a mistake, guess what? You can always go backwards if you are using source control. If you're not using source control, sorry. Okay, and all files for project deployment should be labeled, and that just makes it easier to pull all the same release into a folder. And we're now using MS Build to kind of help us in that area. Okay. And you should be able to create database object structures for everything, including master and MSDB. Hopefully you're not storing any objects in master or MSDB, but you know what? If you are, or you're using things, for example, an operator within MSDB. Well, that is a file that you can actually store into source control and also any of your server configurations, so you can actually find them and make your process very, very repeatable. Okay. Now, one of the things that must happen for us to be able to do a database deployment in lots of different areas is we must be environmentally aware. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Okay, environmentally aware is basically saying that we are on a QA box, or we're on a dev box, or we're on a UAT box, or we're in production. Sometimes some scripts, depending upon what you're doing, you very well may want to say, if we're in prod, get out, return, exit. And sometimes, especially like a database population script that maybe only populate for QA. You can still write it where it's deployed everywhere, but you just go up the very top, find out where your environment you're in. And if you're not in QA, you can just say, get out. I don't want to deploy it. Okay. So we'll definitely look at that. And scripts normally needing environmental awareness is, we talked about one, data population scripts, but the other one definitely would be your security scripts, because normally you would use security that's role-based, and then you would put the different Windows NT or SQL Auth, hopefully you're using Windows NT, you put the different Windows or SQL Auth account into the role, depending upon the environment. We talked about this. Every database script must be able to execute against the exact same database multiple times. So we'll look at how to do that. Because we need database objects to deploy in certain order, we're going to create a deployment process, a deployment structure on the folder system, so that when it's going and processing things, it can go look and go, okay, well, we're going to go process this folder first, and we're going to go process this folder second, and we'll process this folder second, third. That would be something like, for example, you would want to possibly deploy tables before you would deploy your stored procedures. So we'll definitely look at how we come up with the deployment order. Okay. And then different ways to deploy it would be a batch file. We used to use a batch file, but we now use PowerShell, and then all codes, so you could write an application. Okay, so some of the deployment things I've used in the past is inant scripts to get data out and stuff, and then we were using PowerShell, still are technically, and then application deployments. Okay. So one of the gotchas for a cluster deployment, if you're ever deploying your database to a cluster and you're looking for where to deploy it, well, when you go, say, select the server name, it's not going to be the name of the cluster virtual name that you want to deploy to. So you have to go figure out what the virtual name is versus what the node name is within a cluster. And I'll show you how we actually did that within PowerShell. Okay, so we're going to go to a demo, and I'll come back to my contact screen a little bit later on so that you can pull the information. All the scripts today that I'm going to show, they will be available for download, but you will need to send me an email, and then I'll give you the link up there to actually pull it down. I just don't have it wide open. I basically ask you to request it. So I'll bring that back up at the very end for you. So let's get rid of PowerShell for a moment, or PowerPoint, and let me go into our computer here, get logged in. All right, so we got database. Okay, so the one thing we do is on every server that I have is I actually end up having a admin database. Okay, within that admin database, we actually have a table called TB info. And if I select this table, you will actually see that I've got an environment called dev. Okay, So in every one of my machines, basically, I've got this set to what environment they are. So this lets me know that when I'm doing a security script and some of those other things, where I am and what's happening in there. So I'll show you exactly how we use that in just a moment. Again, I'm going through this rather quickly because I want to get you to the PowerShell part of it. Okay, so here's our deployment order table that we were talking about, and I do send you the population script. So basically, this is the order and the objects of which I've had to deploy, and it just shows you all the different objects here that we deploy. So for example, we would put the schema in before we put security, the role before we put the user in, link servers encryption, and then it gets on down to the other objects. So these are all the objects that we've actually used within our process. So this table is very, very important. It actually allows us to, when we're calling through the different objects in the folders, this is how it goes through and does that. So when we do that, what we actually have, let's get over to the area of where all the code is. So we have this DB deployment folder, and this is the folder to where the scripts are currently written to. You could change it to whatever you would like. But if I look at my project, then I have the database admin, I have master, I have MSDB, and I also have worldwide importers. I just changed that today to worldwide importers away from AdventureWorks. This is the new 2016 version of AdventureWorks for us. So some of the things you would look at, for example, security. Well, here's your login security. So we'll take a quick look at that. If you had like a SQL admin or whatever, you might have it hard-coded like that. You can see where I've wrapped it around if not exist, and then I call it and attach the rows. So if that particular account's not on that server, it will go ahead and install it. Now, how do we apply security? That's the tricky one. So you'll notice that I actually have right here a set of environmental variables, okay, set up. So going back up a little bit to the top, that table we just looked at with environment, I go find out where am I? What environment am I on? So once I find that out, I'm setting my security script to say where the environmental equals prod, well, it's going to be this account. And if it's scrub, it's going to be this account, UAT, QA dev, and you could put in whatever environmental names that you would want to. You would just need to go put this in there again. You'll have the script. So once I go set these environmental variables, and notice before we get down to that part, that if you don't want to use something, like you don't have an account for QA or for dev, just put in the word null, and you'll notice down below that what that happens is it will only load the account for prod or UAT, and it will skip that account for QA and dev, and that's for my escalation accounts for DBO, read write, and read only. Okay. So if you come down here, as it's processing, when it's looking at, for example, that SQL Server service account that we saw right up above, I'll scroll back up for just a moment so you can see that. You can see that they're all filled in for all environments. I basically go if the SQL server, if it does not exist and it's not null, so that's how we can use null to skip it, then we're going to create it, okay? And in this particular case, because it is a service account for worldwide importers, it's also looking and making sure that worldwide importers does exist, and then it would go ahead and create the login. And we could run this over and over and over again, and it will not recreate the account for you. So hopefully that kind of shows you a little bit about how you would deal with security, because security is definitely one of them. And you'll notice you can have other files in there for user credentials, audits, whatever the case you may use in your environment. Then MSDB is going to have actually the same thing. You'll notice that there's a job, operator, proxies. Security is the same thing. So if you look at security, there's no real difference except this is database security instead of server level security. And so you'll notice that it's using the SQL Server service account. And again, it's going through the different environments and stuff and looking. And then you'll notice it does basically the same thing. The difference is instead of being a server level account, it is a database security level account that's actually being put in. So, and you'll notice here, another way is you might turn around and say, if it's prod, then go ahead and create the user. If you are in a version less than version 11, then it would do as SP-add role member. Otherwise, it does alter role member for the account. So you can use it for some lesser versions. And where I didn't code that in, you're definitely more than welcome to code that in like I didn't for the security account. So you can definitely do that if you like. All right, so I just want to show you a couple of other scripts here. So just kind of give you an idea. There's an operator. You can turn around and put in an operator. You could definitely do the same thing. You'll notice that if I say that's prod, it's going to go to the SQL team. Everybody that's on the team. But if it's in a non-prod environment, then I basically just say, just send the email to me. I don't want it sent to uh, uh, the whole entire team because they don't need to hear all the noise from the development of UAT environments. And you could definitely do the same thing. You could add the null and put in, I don't want to send any emails, for example, in the dev environment, if you wanted to do that. But I like to get information from all of them. So I know I'm crazy. So all right, so table security. Sometimes you'll also have table security. Even within MSDB, you might have to have someone, if you're selecting the data out of operators, instead of hard coding the email, you can put it in operators, and then you can assign it to the role. So you'll see that there. So anyway, so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the master and MSDB database. Also, you can turn around and those stored procedures that would turn around and set the deployment order. And then we also have population scripts. So there's our deployment order table right there. You can even do a deployment log. I don't use that functionality. Always want to stop and do it, but it'd be nice to see every time in the table when we deployed, but wouldn't be that hard to do it even with PowerShell to add that in. Just finding the time, of course. So once you do a population of deployment order, you'll notice that I basically just turn around and put in the population. Some of these are subfolders. So now let's take a moment as we're kind of looking at this, and let's go back and look at the order and stuff. And you will notice that when we're looking at master, we only have user credential and audits. So when it's dealing with the master deployment, that it is actually, it will go through the entire list of all these deployments, but what it actually does is it won't find anything, so it just continues to the very next object, which is very, very quick. So I haven't basically said, well, only do it in this particular database or the other. It can spin through whatever. Now let's look at a user database. So this would be any user database that you might have. Worldwide importers, we take a look at it. And you'll notice that we have anywhere from schema to security. Under security, we have user role. If you do a database audit, we have the database audit. If you're auditing PII data or whatever. So you can see stored procedures. If you look at the stored procedure, let's just open it up. Looks exactly like a normal stored procedure, and you can either do the syntax of if exists, then drop it, then recreate it, or if you prefer not to recreate it, you can always create it up here and do the alter down here every time to keep the security role. But as you notice, one of the things I like to do is in my scripts of my objects, especially if I can get them away from DBO, is I do like to put the security within the object, because then it's very visible to me, very visible to my other .NET and EF developers that what the security is, context for that object. So I always like to be able to see it on there, and we actually do that even in database project, so everybody can see the deal. But as you notice, there is no difference of writing the store procedure besides just making sure that you can run it over and over and over again. Otherwise, it's exactly the way you would normally write it. One thing to note that you may or may not use, we use an obsolete procedure, obsolete table, obsolete view, whatever the case folder. And what we'll do there is that if we take this stored procedure and we basically say, this stored procedure is no longer used, we're going to drop it. So I would just put in a comment here, put in a comment here, and save it to the obsolete folder, get it out of the main folder, and then when it deploys, it would drop the object out of the database. So that is a way that we are able to keep them. It goes to QA. Oops, I made a mistake. Guess what? You just copy it back out of the obsolete folder, back into the stored procedure area, uncomment it, do your deploy, and you're back up and running again, which is great. It's a great way to take care of objects and not necessarily totally 100% delete them, but keep them around just in case, because as database professionals, we're all paranoid. Table, let's go look at table. Excuse me. So tables are, again, basically the same thing, but one thing you'll notice in the table, the indexes, you can alter fields, those type of things if you want to. One of the things that you will actually end up doing with tables is that you might have a foreign key, okay? And if you have a foreign key on a table, and we'll look at the foreign keys, you'll notice that I pulled them out to be separate. And one of the reasons that I pulled them out to be separate is that if we're populating data or needing to do something with data, even though we do a no check or there's times that a foreign key, based upon the order of which you deploy a table, will cause an error in your deployment. One second. So what we do is we deploy all the tables first, and then we deploy the foreign keys second, so that we don't end up with a problem with our foreign keys. Again, you can populate obsolete triggers or another thing that could bite you. So we do that, and then we get the user-defined types separate also. So those are just some of the things that we actually pull out of the table script, where, like in database project, they're all together. Okay. Views would be exactly the same thing. There is no difference. Functions would be exactly the same thing, and there really is no difference there. So anyway, that is how we go in and basically deploy to the database. Now, let's get into more of the fun part, but I will kind of stop for a moment and see if anybody has a question before we move on to the PowerPoint side of the demonstration. Do you have any questions, Aaron?
So far, no questions in the queue.
Okay, all right, we'll move on to the PowerShell part of it. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to kind of show you the overall deployment PowerShell script. There actually happens to be about 4 scripts that run, but I'm going to show the overall PowerShell deployment script. And of course, you can then look at it and see there. So, you can do remote signed, you can do unrestricted, you can kind of choose where you want to go. So the very first thing we do is we go set the location of where the deployment PowerShell scripts are, so we can actually run through them. We're going to look in detail of the master, but I'm going to go ahead and run it and show you what it's doing. Now you can put in the TFS string that you want. We have been using it with VSO online, so I don't have that particular code here, but we've used it with VSO. You would go down to the branch that you might want to go into within TFS. Where the data is going to go to, like I said, I put it in C deployment on everybody's box. It just helps me to know where to go look during deployment if there is an issue or whatever. Now, one of the things we do here is this. In most environments, we're going to go get the code that has changed from TFS. And it's very important to denote we're going to go get the code that has changed. Not all code, just code that has changed. Okay. But in some environments, we don't want to pull out because we're constantly working in TFS. We may be in a branch, we may not, whatever the case may be. So once we deploy to UAT and we say that user acceptance testing is good, we no longer pull code from TFS. We turn around and mark this as no. I'm going to run it from no here because I don't have access to TFS. And so you can flip this to yes and no depending on whether you want to get the source code from TFS or not. Then the next thing you can do is you can basically say, how far back do I want to go from today? In this particular case, we're going to say we want to go back 30 days. So it would go download all the code that has changed within the last 30 days and allow you to basically, and you can change that to 5 or 100 or whatever you want. The lesser the number, probably the lesser files you have, the greater the number, the more the files you're going to have. And then, of course, if you have multiple products, you could turn around and tell it what product it is. So let's go ahead and run this. And you'll see as it's coming up, it's going to be connecting. And now it is going through based upon what is in that C deployment folder. It's going to deploy basically the files that are in that directory. So it's only going to deploy the files that are in that directory. It will not deploy anything else. So if we went and looked at the admin schema folder, for example, we come back up here and go back to our C drive and we go to our deployment folder and look at schema. You'll notice there's 2 files, and you'll notice down here that right here there are 2 files that were deployed right there and there. Oh, sorry, go up a little higher, there and there, that the schema was deployed. So it will only deploy what's there. Now, one other key to this is that if you have multiple databases, the other thing is it will only deploy the databases that are on that have code within this folder. It will not deploy to any other database. So now let's go look at some of the magic. But first of all, let's go look at a couple other things that the PowerShell actually does for you also. So when you're deploying, one of the things it does is it creates you 4 different log files. And of course, 2 of these will not get anything for us because we're not using TFS. So right here is the TFS log. It actually logs for us and shows us the things that we would actually pull out of TFS. And it actually shows you, if you put a number in there, I'll show you how far back it goes and stuff too. So that's what you see when the TFS log comes through. Now, when you're deploying, how many times have you been asked for a build manifest and to know what's been deployed? Well, guess what? Here is your build manifest. Here is the date and the time that we deployed the code. And here's all the code that we actually deployed. So now you know exactly, you can go look and someone says, but wait a minute, we didn't deploy X. And we can say, well, yeah, you're right. We did not deploy X because X is not in the list. Did you check it in? Maybe they didn't check it in or whatever, and we didn't grab it because they did not check it in. So a very good build manifest list for you. And then the next thing you'll see is that because it's changing databases and stuff, is you can see that it actually, this is the very detailed list of what it has changed and what it's done. So, and then if you want a synopsis of it, here is the error log of just the errors out of that previous log. So we actually have 2 scripts that failed. They're in this folder, and it's the that particular table. And you can go then look at it saying, well, the select has got some syntax using the create alter, and if I remember right, I had a missing parameter, parentheses there. So you can actually see what your errors are, what didn't deploy accordingly. Hopefully, when you get to prod, this will be empty. All it will show is this line and the date you deployed when you get to production. But when you're deploying to QA or UAT and your scripts aren't quite right, well, you'll get that information. And you'll notice here's a security script that also, that domain, that server doesn't exist. So that's why that's there. But a very nice deployment error log for you. So let's go look at the details of basically how this is occurring. So the first script we want to open up is going to be this master deploy underscore PS1. So let's start with that particular script. All right, so let me go to the white screen here. So you'll notice the parameters that we passed in. There are some variable checks that I have at the top that I have commented out that if you want to use it. It tells us where the PowerShell code is, and if you don't put in how many days, we automatically go back to 15 days. If the code basically needs to come out of TFS instead of what's just sitting there on the server, then you would put in yes, and it would go run this PowerShell script, which would go and do TFS. It'd go do a TFS download. Now, the nice thing about this being modular for you is that you can change this to whatever source control you're using. If you're not using TFS and you're using Borland Star Team or many others, then you could go ahead and change this. FYI, it does not work well within Get, and that's another reason that we turned around. We're now storing ours in Get. Another reason that we're moving to Database Project, even though this has worked well for us for over 15 years. Okay. And then once it gets all the code, the very next thing it does, it actually deploys the database itself and what you saw. So let's go look at, let's start out with the TFS download and see what's happening. So looking at the TFS download, first of all, to denote that you're going to have some snap-ins loaded. Microsoft Team Foundation PowerShell if you're using TFS. If you're not using TFS, then of course you won't need to have this particular snap-in. The other thing I actually ended up having to do to get this to work, to go look in TFS for me, is I had to go grab out of Microsoft this particular DLL, and I ended up putting it in the PowerShell deployment area for this particular area for it to run. So, so just FYI, you will need that particular DLL. But as soon as we do that, then we're going to go back to the root folder, tell it where we're going to download the file. One of the things that we do want to do is always clean that directory before we put any new code in there. We don't want code that we pulled in to run over and over again because we left something in there. So we remove all the items out of the folder and then we start anew, start afresh. Okay. And you can see it removing some items and stuff. And then here's where it's actually writing to the logs for us. It's going in and writing the data to the logs for us. And then going down a little bit further, this is where it's actually connecting to the TFS server. So right in here, it's actually connecting over to our TFS server. FYI, if you download this specific code, it is for a TFS local version. If you want the online VSO version, I will see if I can grab that and give it to you if you're using VSO online. So as it's going through, it's going again, telling us what it's downloading for the file manifest so we know, and it's pulling all the files down we're wanting just the .sql. You can see where we've used it for .rdl files also. All right, and as we're going through, then it's got some error handling. It basically is replacing some slashes for us, some log files, and telling us what they are. And if it didn't find a file, then it tells us at that point. So this is how we actually go in and actually pull the data out of TFS. If you're using some other source control, all you would have to do is actually create this particular module and then just put in its parameters and everything you need right in this area for your own source control. So you would need to go write that part if you're using something besides TFS. Now let's see how it's doing the database. So let's go up to the database. Let's go up the top of the script here. Okay, so we got our parameters coming in. I am using the SQL PS module. If you'll notice, the one thing that we're doing right through here is we're going in and getting, let me see if I can get that highlighted for you. There we go. What we're doing right through here is basically we're getting either the clustered virtual name, if it's a cluster, or we're just getting the computer name if it's a non-clustered computer. So as you're well aware, we're deploying code to the SQL Server, and it's in a clustered environment. We're using the virtual name, not the node name of the server. And then as we're going down, again, we're checking to make sure that our folder's all set. If they haven't passed it in, if you're, like I said, I like it in that folder. Some people wanted it somewhere else. I won eventually, and it just stayed in that folder. There's all your logging that's going on for you. Here's some specific files that it's going to deploy every time for you. And that's your deployment order that we saw a while ago, is how it deploys it. So it's going to deploy the table, the procedure, and then populate it for you. So you'll definitely need those 3 scripts. I just allow them to run every single time and hard code them. Okay. We're testing paths. And then again, here is the installation tables that we're installing that we just saw. Okay. Now here's where that it goes in and finds out what environment you're in. So that's why that's very important to know whether you're in production, UAT, QA, or whatever environment. The reason you don't have to pass in your databases is because we're going in and saying, give me all the databases from sys databases where it's not tempdb, model, report, server, server, tempdb, or SSIS. You can, of course, modify that if you happen to put security code or something, for example, in the SSIS database, which you might need to. And then here's where it actually gets that deployment order that we were talking about before, of how it knows what to deploy and when. So it will go and pull everything in that particular order, and it goes through the folder structure. So you'll see right below that it'll go for every database. It goes in and finds the path in the deployment order that it was looking for, and of course it will log it. It will go get all the files out of that particular path that's got the .sql name. And then once it does that, it's going to actually use SQL CMD to actually go and deploy that file for us on that particular server. So that's how we actually get it in there. We're writing 2 error logs that we're going through and getting the information that we can. So this is how that we have saved ourselves from actually having to manually or having one file deploy everything and have errors. Basically, when we're checking out of TFS, we're actually getting the latest version that's been changed. If it's got an error, we just go check it out of TFS, fix it, put it back into TFS, check it in, rerun our deployment, and everything is up and running and great. And we can actually turn around and have a very repeatable and very consistent deployment process. So those are the 4 files that we, the PowerShell files that we actually use. Nothing out there that's really crazy about it. The only one that you might need to do some work with is the TFS or your source control. So don't forget that you'll need to download some uh, modules if you actually do end up using TFS. So, Aaron, that is it, unless people have questions or whatever.
Yep,
So,
already got some questions in the queue. Since you're a VG leader as well, I'm sure you know how to go into the question pane and grab them.
okay, let me see if I can go out to see if my Mac will behave itself. And I
Unlikely.
could go to the question pane. There we are.
Absolutely likely, Aaron.
Okay.
Remind me to
Uh,
tell you about my Mac experience sometime.
yeah, this,
Okay.
yeah, really. This is a PowerPoint group. No, it's not a PowerPoint group. It's a PowerShell. So I'm not sure how you got here, Thomas.
You said PowerPoint at the beginning of the session.
Yeah. Oh, did I? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's would be my mistake. Sorry about that. How is dependencies of a function within a function resolved during deployment? Sometimes what we have to do is if we have something called within something, and of course we'll try to prevent the embedding of objects as much as we can because it just number one, it's a pain in the neck to go debug and figure out what's going on. But if you have both of them being deployed at the same time, then sometimes, and not very often, but sometimes we might have to number them at the beginning and say one underscore the name of the function to get it to deploy in the order that we want it to. If you've got, if you're deploying both at the same time. If you're only deploying the one, it works just fine without an issue if the other one's already deployed. So hope that answers your question, Yusha. Same thing if you're to Maurice, same type of thing. If you actually, the table will be deployed first because if you look at the deployment order, you'll notice that tables go first. Let me go and actually pull that up and get the deployment screen up within SQL. And that way you can actually see the order. And I'll move that out of the way. Now let's see if we pull this up. And you'll notice that a table is way up here and then a function is like item number 19. So a table is going to come before store procedure, populate trigger, obsolete foreign key, function, a view. So the tables will get populated first if I've got your question right there. And then most of the time, we don't need to handle numbering objects within the table, within the folder structure to get them to order, deploy in a certain order, but sometimes we do. Very rare though. I think, Yusef, I showed you that when you are in the database, the one thing that we do with the objects is, let me go back to SSMS again. When we're deploying an object, we go in and say use database to basically keep it out of MSDB or master. As far as because and the other thing is, Yusef, we keep our database name. If I understand your question right, we keep our database the same name throughout all the environments. Uh, if it's worldwide importers in dev, it's worldwide importers in QA, UAT, and also in production. So it's exactly the same all the way through environments. We don't go changing the name of the database. And I'm doing the same thing within database project. Okay. was the order of the object it gets applied. The order of the object it gets applied is back to what we just looked at a while ago. This is the order. I give you the table population script, so this is the order in which the object would get. It would get everything out of the table folder, everything out of the store procedure folder, the trigger folder, the foreign key folder, the function folder. It would get everything out of each one of those folders. So that would be how it actually gets applied. And it looks like I don't have any other questions at this particular time, or if I missed it, just raise your, submit it again and I'll see it here. While they're doing that, let me go ahead and repost up the PowerPoint. If you would like the scripts that does this, including the PowerPoint scripts, I give it to you all freely because we all need help. Just take my email address right here, armordva@gmail.com. Send me an email, and I will hook you up in Google and give you a link back to where you can download the solution that you can use. And then feel free to send me any questions or anything you might have if you end up having trouble figuring out how it is. We did go rather quickly through the first part. Being a PowerShell group, I wanted to actually get you to the PowerShell part and not dwell too much on the database script part. Okay. And it looks like we don't have any further questions at this point. Aaron, looks like I've answered them all.
Yep, looks like, and we've got 7 minutes left, and that's a great job. I actually did get the, stupid me, I got the, what am I trying to say? Slide deck from Pass HQ while you were presenting. I thought you were going to go for a couple more minutes, so I didn't have it opened up just yet. But let me just check and see if there's any good news in there that we need to share with the folks. Sorry, you can probably hear the baby in the background.
I can hear the baby. I will be doing the database project version of this later on. So, you know, if you wanted to have me back later on to see how database project works, we could do that. But yeah, being more of a PowerShell group, it's more of the deployment of the database project than it is the writing of the database project. So yeah, I would not be in PowerShell.
You wouldn't build the project in PowerShell? Why not?
No, thank you. I probably could, but yeah, we'll leave that to someone else.
Can you guys see my screen?
Let me see if I can see it there.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep,
yes,
we
we
can.
can. Yeah.
Great. Well, you can see the new logo and the new website, and we are no longer SQL Pass. We are just pass.org. Pass engagement campaign. Don't know anything about this. First hearing about this. So not sure what to tell you. But I do have some more virtual sessions to tell you all about. Obviously, we've got our PowerShell session today. We had one earlier today, the operational validation. And we've got one in just about 2 weeks for our regular monthly meeting, which will be showing PowerShell for implementation engineers. And let's look for PowerShell meetings. I think the old logos were great, but apparently these are our new virtual chapter logos. So easy to tell them apart from each other.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, I know. It's like roll back, roll back.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be a rollback.
Yeah. So, yes, there was a. Sorry, sorry, I'm misreading it. Dallas and Denver, they both happen to start with D, and we're doing BI editions. of SQL Saturdays. So, anyways, here are the upcoming SQL Saturdays. They
Ooh,
don't have the one for South Island. That's great.
Lisbon is going to be awesome from what I heard. Sequel Queen is going to be there and Kendra, I
Hmm.
think. And then I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some PowerShell stuff there too.
I heard
Lisbon is
stuff.
big into the PowerShell.
Oh no, that's a different event. Tuga. Never mind. Sorry.
Two guys at
Look at
two.
that.
Or you can
Yep.
come see me in Raleigh on the 11th. So
Oh, you're
Yeah.
presenting PowerShell in Raleigh.
I'm gonna be doing the actual version of consistent deployments, but using the database project instead of the way we're
Oh,
currently.
cool.
And pass.org, although I think their Twitter handle is still um, just SQL Pass. So um, that's
Hey,
pretty much it for that.
I know this is kind of after the fact, but I was just thinking that I will pass on the new logo.
Oh,
Thanks,
Very,
guys.
very, very
Thanks.
good. Very good.
Yep. So yeah, good one. Oh, pass on the new logo. So there it is. Get used to seeing that, at least for Pass HQ. And
That one I don't mind. I think I kind of like it. It kind of looks like the Olympics. It's the virtual chapter one. I guess it has a little bit of PowerShell blue, but not as much as I like.
oh yeah, it's like I told him I'd give it a chance, but it's already wearing on me.
Yeah.
we
It's not
don't
very.
we don't have a PowerShell chapter anymore. Virtual chapter.
It's a virtual group.
It's a virtual group. That's right.
I need to get used to so much change in my life.
uh, yeah. Oh, I don't even like my virtualization one. Oh, that's ugly. I had to move the part the
Until it had been put on a board with all these other ones, I didn't realize how much I disliked it.
Yeah. Yeah, I could
yeah.
see that.
I
Well,
was like,
at least
eh.
yours is not two different colors. It looks
uh,
like
Ooh, we are lucky. It does. Yeah, I would agree. We do have one of the better ones.
yeah.
um, hey, did you answer the question about have you tried using MS Build? Can't remember if you got that one. I was just making sure.
I did not answer that one, but yes, in this solution, we have used MS Build, uh, and it worked fairly well. And I can get you the code for the MS Build part of it. Um, but like I said, we're
Cool.
going more. It's a lot easier in DB Project, and it'll go to Azure. So they finally pulled me away from this after 15 years.
Okay. Come on, it's gonna let me do this. Sorry, I'm just trying to switch my slide deck, and I don't think it's letting me.
I see SQLPS.io voter votes SSRS.
You do see that? Oh, excellent.
You
I
just
didn't know
went away
you
from
could.
it. There you go. Now we see it again.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, just wanted to throw one more shout out for that one. We've already got like 25 votes. Every vote helps. The team out there, they know that one vote from one person probably is, representative of, I have no idea what their numbers are, like 100 actual customers who want it and just don't know that there's an item out there that they should upvote. So just one vote has a lot of impact. So just because it has 25, don't stop there. All right. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us and making time for us and showing our